Translate this, and my salary is yours. The millionaire laughed, certain she would fail. But when she picked up the folder, what happened next left everyone in the room speechless. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story. He tossed the thick folder across the table, smirking. Translate this, and maybe you'll earn my salary. $25,000. She accepted the challenge. The mansion was quiet except for the soft echo of polished shoes against marble floors. Outside, the sun had just begun its lazy crawl over the horizon, spilling gold over trimmed hedges and sculpted fountains. Inside, the millionaire lounged in his leather chair, arms folded, smirking at the nervous crowd that had gathered in the grand hall. He loved these little displays, watching people stumble, fumble, and feel small. At the center of the room stood her, Amara, a young maid barely out of her teens. Her hands were calloused from scrubbing floors, her uniform threadbare and faded, her stomach hollow from weeks of skipped meals, yet her eyes held a quiet fire that no hunger could extinguish. The millionaire's gaze swept over her, as if she were a joke, a toy to be tested and discarded. Translate this, he said, tossing a thick, leather-bound folder onto the table in front of her. The weight of the documents made her flinch. Do it right, and my entire month's salary is yours. Fail, and, well, you'll just be hungry for another week. His laugh rang cruel, echoing off the marble walls. The room snickered. Some of the house staff exchanged nervous glances. Everyone had seen what happened to those who failed his tests: dismissal, ridicule, and humiliation. Amara swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had always been quiet, blending into the background, invisible to everyone but the wall she cleaned and the floor she polished. But today, something inside her stirred. The folder was heavy in her hands. The pages were covered in a language she barely knew, legal terms and technical jargon thrown together in a way that would have intimidated a scholar. The millionaire leaned back, smirking. You'll never get this right, he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. But let's see if luck is on your side. Amara's heart pounded, not just with fear, but with determination. She had grown up in the roughest neighborhoods, where survival meant sharp eyes, a sharper mind, and a will that refused to break. She had taught herself languages from old textbooks she found discarded in the library. She had memorized legal terms from newspapers she swept up every morning. She had dreams bigger than the mansion's gilded gates could contain. As she opened the folder, a wave of panic swept through her. The text was dense, almost mocking in its complexity. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath, steadying herself. She whispered to no one, not even the millionaire, "I can do this." The millionaire's assistant hovered nearby, arms crossed, smirking. "You'll fail. Everyone fails," he said, barely hiding his amusement. The other staff murmured their agreement. Even the luxurious chandeliers above seemed to cast a judgmental glow on her small frame. Amara flipped through the first few pages, scanning the text, and her eyes narrowed. Slowly, methodically, she began identifying patterns, familiar words, and phrases she had studied in secret. The room was silent, except for the faint scratching of her pen as she made notes. The millionaire, sensing something unusual, leaned forward, curiosity replacing some of his arrogance. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes dragged like hours. Sweat gathered at Amara's temples, her stomach growled, and yet her hands moved steadily. She ignored the laughter, the whispers, the judgment in the room. Her focus narrowed to a single point, the translation in front of her. Each word she deciphered felt like a victory. Each sentence she completed a quiet rebellion against the assumptions stacked against her. Finally, she looked up. The room had grown tense. The millionaire's smirk had faltered slightly. She was trembling, but her eyes shone with a quiet confidence. "It's done," she said, placing the folder on the table, her hands steady now. He picked it up, scanning the pages. His laughter caught in his throat. The words were correct. Flawless. Every sentence perfectly translated. The room held its breath. The millionaire's eyes widened, disbelief washing over his face. He had expected failure, humiliation, yet here was a young maid, someone he had dismissed as unworthy, who had not only succeeded but excelled. For a moment, there was silence. Then a small, almost imperceptible nod from him. Amara's lips curled into a faint smile. The first time in her life, she felt seen. Not for her uniform, not for her role, but for her mind, her skill, her determination. The millionaire's assistant looked between his employer and the folder, unsure what to say. The other staff whispered, some in awe, some in envy. Amara, still trembling, returned to the shadows she usually occupied, but she knew something had shifted. Today, she had claimed her place in a world that had always doubted her. The millionaire finally spoke, his voice lower now, tinged with respect, or perhaps the first trace of fear. "You did it," he said. "I didn't think anyone could." He reached for his pen to authorize the salary. The weight of his disbelief pressed down on the room like a storm cloud. Amara's mind raced, not with pride, but with a quiet resolve. She had survived this test, but she knew it was only the beginning. Today, the world had seen a glimpse of her talent. Tomorrow, it would see her brilliance. Amara's victory in translating the first batch of documents should have brought relief, but instead, it was only the calm before the storm. The millionaire's eyes lingered on her, sharp and calculating. There was a new challenge simmering behind that gaze, unspoken yet palpable. He had underestimated her once. He would not make that mistake again. "Very impressive," he said, his voice smooth, but laced with something darker now. "But translating a single folder, that's only the beginning. You see, I deal with more than just words. I deal with contracts, legal loopholes, languages you've never even heard of." He motioned for a second, much larger stack of documents to be brought forward. The folders were heavy, bound in leather, each one taller than the last. Amara felt the weight settle on the table, and for a heartbeat, she feared the sheer impossibility of it all. The millionaire leaned back, a cruel smirk dancing at the corners of his lips. "Translate all of these by sundown," he said. "Do it flawlessly, and the salary, and perhaps a bonus, will be yours. Fail, and you'll have nothing. No money, no pride, nothing." A murmur ran through the staff. Some shuffled their feet nervously. Others whispered behind gloved hands. They had watched many before her crumble under similar pressure. But Amara felt a surge of something stronger than fear, something that had been buried deep within her through years of struggle, defiance. She took a deep breath, running her fingers over the top folder. The leather was smooth, cool beneath her fingertips, but what lay inside was anything but. Legal clauses, financial terminology, foreign words woven together like a trap. Her stomach knotted as she flipped through the pages. Hunger gnawed at her, but it was nothing compared to the fire burning in her chest. She would not fail. Not this time. Hours passed. The mansion seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing closer with the weight of expectation. The millionaire walked back and forth, occasionally glancing over her shoulder, his smirk replaced by a growing unease. How could someone so young, so underestimated, handle this? He could not understand it. To him, intelligence came with wealth, education, and pedigree. But Amara had learned in the hard way. Brilliance could exist anywhere, even in someone who polished floors for a living. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Amara's hands ached from writing. Her eyes stung from concentration, but she did not stop. Every word she translated felt like a small victory, a silent rebellion against the assumptions stacked against her. Each sentence completed chipped away at the millionaire's smug arrogance. By mid-afternoon, a crowd had gathered, drawn not just by curiosity, but by disbelief. Amara worked in silence, her focus unbroken, yet everyone could feel the tension crackling in the air. The millionaire's smirk had completely faded. He was pacing now, restless. He had underestimated her skill once, but watching her work now, he realized he had never faced anyone like this before. Amara paused only once, briefly closing her eyes and pressing her palm to her forehead. Her stomach growled, a sharp reminder of her hunger. But she pushed through. Hunger had always been a companion, a shadow at her shoulder. Today, it fueled her. Today, it sharpened her mind. The sun was a fiery orb just above the horizon when she finally reached the last document. Her hand shook as she wrote the final translation, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph coursing through her veins. She set the pen down and exhaled slowly, surveying the mountain of paper she had just conquered. Every word was correct. Every phrase was precise. The millionaire approached, scanning the documents with growing disbelief. He flipped through pages, his eyes widening. How did you? His words faltered, his composure cracking. Every line, every paragraph was perfectly translated. His jaw tightened. For the first time, he seemed truly unsettled. Amara's lips curved into a faint smile. She had done what no one thought possible, not just surviving the challenge, but excelling at it. She looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. There was no arrogance in her eyes, no need for validation. Just quiet, unshakable confidence. The staff whispered among themselves, some in awe, others in disbelief. The millionaire's assistant tried to mask his shock with a nervous chuckle, but fell flat. Even the chandeliers seemed to shine differently, highlighting Amara's small, victorious figure against the opulence of the room. Finally, the millionaire spoke, voice low and measured. You did it. All of it. Flawlessly. He paused, swallowing his pride. Underestimated you. Truly. And I apologize for doubting you. Amara inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the words but not needing them to validate herself. She had proved more than just her intelligence. She had proven resilience, focus, and the quiet power of someone who refuses to be seen as less than they are. As she stood there, fatigue threatening to topple her, a new thought emerged. This was more than just a paycheck. This was a door opening, a chance to show the world who she truly was. The millionaire, once smug and unchallenged, now stared at her with a mixture of respect, disbelief, and something closer to fear. She had conquered the impossible, and yet, deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The golden light of the late afternoon spilled into the grand hall, casting long, dramatic shadows across the marble floor. Amara sat at the massive oak table, her hands still trembling from exhaustion, yet steady enough to handle the final task the millionaire had thrown at her. The stack of folders she had already conquered now seemed like a mountain she had climbed barefoot, but she had reached the summit. The millionaire paced in front of her, hands clasped behind his back. His usual arrogance had softened into something else. Curiosity, disbelief, and a hint of fear. I have never seen anyone do this, not in all my years, he muttered, almost to himself. How can someone so ordinary accomplish something so extraordinary? Ordinary. The word struck Amara for a moment, but she let it slide past her like a cloud. She had long ago learned that the world's definition of ordinary rarely aligned with reality. Talent, intelligence, and courage were not dictated by wealth, status, or appearances. They were forged in struggle, sharpened in silence, and unveiled in moments like this. Carefully, she flipped open the final folder, revealing a series of complex contracts and legal documents in a language she had only studied in secret. Her heart raced, not from fear, but anticipation. She knew the world outside these walls had underestimated her, but here, now, she had the chance to reveal the truth. Her mind was a weapon sharper than any wealth, sharper than any arrogance. The millionaire leaned closer, peering at her work. This is impossible, he whispered. His voice was quieter now, tinged with a mix of awe and panic. No one should be able to. His words trailed off as he realized what she was doing. Every line she translated was perfect, every phrase precise, every subtle nuance captured with brilliance. Amara's hands moved with a rhythm that was almost meditative. She was no longer just a maid completing a task. She was a force of nature, unstoppable and brilliant. The room seemed to shrink around her, the whispers of the staff fading into the background. All that existed was the translation, the words on the page, and a quiet power that had grown inside her over years of hardship. Finally, she set the last pen down and pushed the folder forward. "It's finished," she said, her voice calm but resonant. Every eye in the room was on her, every breath held. The millionaire reached for the folder, scanning the pages in a frenzied, almost desperate rush. Then it happened, the moment that would define everything. His eyes widened, his jaw slackened, and the arrogance that had been his armor for years crumbled completely. Every word was correct, every sentence perfectly translated. He had expected failure, humiliation, something to laugh at, but instead, he found brilliance. Raw, undeniable, and humbling. Silence fell over the room, heavy, incomplete. The staff stared, mouths slightly open, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The millionaire, who had once held power and confidence like a shield, now stood stripped of it, staring at the young maid who had defied every expectation. You did it," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. He swallowed, attempting to regain composure, but failing. All of it flawlessly. Amara met his gaze, steady and unyielding. There was no triumph in her eyes, no gloating. Only the quiet satisfaction of someone who had proven her worth without needing permission. She had taken the impossible and made it inevitable. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, shaking his head in disbelief. I underestimated you. I thought this was a simple test. But you've shown me something I could never have imagined." His words hung in the air, heavy with regret and awe. From the corner of the room, the assistant whispered under his breath, almost in disbelief, no one has ever done this." The other staff nodded quietly, some in awe, some in envy, but all changed forever by the moment they had just witnessed. Amara felt the weight of the moment, but she also felt a surge of clarity. This was not just about a paycheck. This was a revelation, an unveiling of truth that could not be denied. Talent, courage, and determination could exist anywhere, even in the shadows of wealth and privilege. And today they had been seen. The millionaire extended his hand, hesitantly at first, then more firmly. I owe you more than just your salary," he said, still shaking his head. "I owe you respect, and I owe you the truth. No one should ever be underestimated again. Especially not you." Amara took his hand briefly, then withdrew it without a word. She did not need his validation. She had always known her worth. What she had done today was proof, for him, for the staff, and for herself. As she walked away from the table, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Hunger still gnawed at her belly, but it was nothing compared to the satisfaction that coursed through her veins. She had been invisible for so long, overlooked and underestimated. Yet in one day, she had changed the narrative. The millionaire sat back, staring at the folder that had undone his assumptions. For the first time in years, he felt powerless, humbled by someone he had thought beneath him. And in that realization, Amara's quiet power radiated, unshakable and undeniable. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the grand hall in a wash of orange and pink. Amara stepped into the fading light, carrying not just her talent, but the knowledge that the world could no longer dismiss her. Today, she had turned hunger into brilliance, mockery into respect, and invisibility into undeniable presence. And in that glow, she knew this was only the beginning. The grand hall, once filled with tension and judgment, now felt different, lighter, almost reverent. The millionaire sat frozen, the leather chair beneath him creaking softly as he processed the impossible. The folders lay before him, immaculate, flawless translations that had turned his arrogance into astonishment. He had seen many people fail, some spectacularly, but none had ever shattered his assumptions so completely. Amara stood quietly, her back straight, her eyes calm yet bright with the fire of triumph. She had done more than translate words. She had translated her struggle, her hunger, her years of quiet perseverance into something undeniable. The room was no longer a stage for humiliation, but a witness to her brilliance. The millionaire finally spoke, his voice steady but low, carrying the weight of both awe and humility. You've done what I never thought possible. Not just one folder, not just the challenge I thought would break you, but all of it. Perfectly. He paused, glancing at the staff, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. You've earned not just your salary, but my respect, and more than that, recognition. Recognition. The word felt strange in Amara's ears. She had long labored in obscurity, her skills invisible beneath a uniform and the labels the world had forced upon her. Yet here, in this moment, she could finally taste the acknowledgement she had earned. Slowly, she stepped forward, folding her hands neatly in front of her. I accept, she said quietly, almost humbly, yet there was no mistaking the pride in her voice. But I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And because I could. The millionaire's assistant, who had been lurking in the shadows, shook his head, muttering, I can't believe it, she actually did it. The other staff nodded in agreement, some smiling shyly, others staring in awe. Amara's quiet courage had shattered their expectations, just as it had shattered the millionaire's arrogance. The millionaire reached for a pen, signing papers to authorize her salary, and a substantial bonus, more than she had ever imagined. He watched her carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. You've taught me a lesson I won't forget, he admitted. Talent and determination, they can come from anywhere, even from someone the world has ignored. Amara accepted the papers with a nod. The numbers on the check were staggering, but they were secondary. What mattered was the acknowledgement that her skill, her mind, and her perseverance had finally been seen. She had taken a challenge meant to belittle her and transformed it into an undeniable victory. As she left the grand hall, the golden light of sunset spilling over the marble floors, whispers followed her. The millionaire's voice called out softly behind her, Amara, wait. She turned, curious, and he stepped closer, holding out an envelope. Inside was an invitation, a chance to work in a capacity that matched her intelligence, a role she had only dreamed of. You've earned more than just money, he said. You've earned opportunity. I can't undo the past, but I can help open doors for your future. Amara smiled faintly, taking the envelope. She didn't need to say a word. Her success, her victory, her talent. It spoke louder than any words could. Word of her achievement quickly spread beyond the mansion. News of the young maid who had translated impossible documents with flawless precision caught the attention of local media and influential figures. People were stunned, inspired, and moved by the story of someone so overlooked proving her worth in the most extraordinary way. For Amara, life would never be the same. She continued her work with renewed purpose, but now doors were opening that had once seemed permanently closed. Her talent was recognized, her voice valued, and her courage celebrated. And though she had faced hunger, doubt, and mockery, she had emerged stronger, unbroken, and unshakable. Back in the grand hall, the millionaire sat quietly, reflecting. His arrogance had been stripped away, replaced with respect, for Amara, for those he had underestimated, and for the truth that brilliance often hides in plain sight. He realized that power without insight is fragile, and that the world has a way of humbling those who fail to see the potential in others. Amara walked through the mansion's grand doors into the cool evening air. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a symbol of a new beginning. She carried not just a paycheck, but a story of perseverance, courage, and triumph. Hunger had pushed her, doubt had tested her, and mockery had challenged her. But in the end, none of it could stop her light from shining. As the night descended, Amara looked up at the stars, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in her chest. She had survived, she had excelled, and she had claimed her place in a world that had tried to ignore her. The mansion, once a stage for humiliation, had become the witness to her brilliance. And from this moment on, nothing could ever diminish the fire that burned within her. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable day in the grand hall. The mansion, once a theater of tension and mockery, had settled back into its quiet opulence, but the echoes of Amara's brilliance lingered in every corner. The staff spoke of her in hushed tones, inspired by her courage, amazed at her skill, and humbled by the way she had refused to let anyone define her worth. Amara herself moved through the mansion differently now. She no longer carried the weight of invisibility or doubt. Her steps were steadier, her gaze calmer, and her presence impossible to ignore. The envelope the millionaire had given her, the one granting opportunity, mentorship, and resources, was more than just a ticket to a new life. It was a symbol of validation, of proof that hard work and brilliance could break through even the thickest barriers of skepticism and prejudice. Yet it was not just the money, the recognition, or even the doors that had opened for her that mattered. What mattered most was the transformation within her, a quiet confidence born from the knowledge that she could face impossible challenges and emerge victorious. She had turned hunger into fuel, mockery into motivation, and doubt into determination. And in doing so, she had rewritten her own story. The millionaire, for his part, had changed as well. His arrogance had been tempered, his pride humbled by the young maid who had dared to defy expectations. He had learned a lesson he would not forget, that brilliance does not reside in wealth, status, or entitlement. It resides in anyone willing to work, learn, and rise above the obstacles that life places before them. Word of Amara's accomplishments spread far beyond the mansion's walls. Business leaders, scholars, and journalists marveled at her story. They wrote about the young maid who had translated complex legal documents flawlessly, who had outshone those with years of formal education, and who had done so under pressure, hunger, and mockery. She became a symbol of potential realized, a living testament to the idea that greatness can spring from the most unlikely places. Yet, Amara remained humble. She did not seek the spotlight for its own sake. She understood that her journey was bigger than fame. It was a story to inspire, a proof that perseverance and talent could defy even the harshest expectations. She began mentoring others quietly, helping those overlooked or underestimated, sharing her knowledge and her courage. The mansion had been the stage for her triumph, but the world beyond became the canvas on which she painted her legacy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the mansion glowed in the soft warmth of twilight, Amara reflected on her journey. She thought of the challenges she had faced, the hunger gnawing at her belly, the laughter of those who doubted her, the weight of expectation that threatened to crush her spirit. And she smiled, not out of pride, but out of understanding. Those moments had shaped her. They had forged the resilience, focus, and quiet strength that now defined her. The millionaire approached her that evening, not as a judge, not as an oppressor, but as someone changed by witnessing her talent. "Amara," he said softly, "I still don't understand how you did it. But I know one thing, I will never forget it. You've shown me what true brilliance looks like." Amara nodded gently. "Thank you. But it's not just about me. It's about everyone who has been overlooked, underestimated, or told they aren't enough. If my story can inspire even one person to believe in themselves, then all the struggle was worth it." The millionaire's eyes softened, and he nodded. There was a respect there that could not be bought or demanded, only earned. And Amara had earned it, through skill, courage, and the quiet refusal to be dismissed. Months turned into years. Amara's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. Opportunities flowed, doors opened, and yet she never forgot where she had come from. She continued to rise, not just for herself, but for those who had been invisible, those who had been mocked, and those who had been hungry for recognition. She became more than a story. She became a symbol, a legacy of perseverance, brilliance, and triumph against all odds. As she stood one evening overlooking the city from a high balcony, the sun setting in brilliant streaks of gold and crimson, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a journey complete yet ongoing. Her hands, once calloused from scrubbing floors, now held the power to change lives. Her mind, once overlooked, now commanded respect. And her spirit, once tested by hunger and doubt, now radiated a brilliance that could never be dimmed. Amara turned away from the balcony, stepping into the light of her future. The world had underestimated her once, but never again. She carried with her the knowledge that no challenge was too great, no mockery too cruel, no hunger too sharp to stop someone determined to claim their destiny. And so, the maid who had been told she could never succeed had done more than survive. She had thrived, inspired, and left a legacy that would endure far beyond the walls of the mansion, a shining testament to the power of talent, courage, and unwavering determination. Thank you for watching. If you thought that was shocking, wait until you see what happens next in our next story. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss it.